If you lived in the mid-1990s, these types of images were unavoidable. They were technically known as single-image stereograms, or auto-stereograms, but they were probably best known for the ones marketed under the name Magic Eye. This book from 1993 and those like it in the years following were inescapable in the 1990s. Everywhere that sold books had a few on hand, and mall kiosks were popping up constantly, selling posters, literature, calendars, shirts, all kinds of auto-stereograms. And the whole idea here was that they were a single image, which, if you looked at just right, made the printed 2D picture result in the perception of a 3D image with depth, no glasses or lenses required. And with only a single image, not two, as with traditional stereograms that went back to the 1800s. No, these single-image stereograms or auto-stereograms, Magic Eye, whatever you want to call them, they were very much a 1990s thing. And it went beyond retail. You saw these things all throughout pop culture, showing up as a nationally syndicated comic strip in magazines like Nintendo Power, on album covers like Remember Two Things by the Dave Matthews Band, and being referenced in TV shows like Seinfeld and Friends, and of course, being an entire running gag subplot in the movie Mallrats.
Wow, it's a schooner!
It's not a schooner, it's a sailboat.
A schooner is a sailboat, stupid head.
And you know, that really was the thing. These Magic Eye posters and books separated the population into those that could see and those that could not. Though reportedly it's only a small percentage of people who can't see them at all, and the vast majority with functioning depth perception can at some point with the right technique. And I was enamored with them as a kid, 8 or 9 years old, when I first saw these at some kiosk or store or something, probably at Hanes Mall in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And you know, being a computer-obsessed kid, I knew just looking at them that they must be computer generated. And I always wondered how in the world they made these things. There was a little bit of information in the book itself, but not a whole lot. And then over the years, there would be something in the media that would remind me like, oh yeah, I need to look into how these were done. You know, there was this Vox video years ago in 2016 that was great, but they didn't really show how exactly the images were generated, nor have the articles on places like Mental Floss or the American Institute of Graphic Arts. They were invaluable research here, but it was really the software itself that I've always been interested in. And that brings us to a major subject of this video, Stereo Workshop for Macintosh and MS-DOS PCs by Anything Enterprises, the same folks as Magic Eye, which cost $40 when it first went on sale in late 1991. And I've got to give a huge thank you to LGR viewer Dustin. His dad bought a copy of this when Dustin was a kid, and in 2020 he ran across it again and donated it to the channel. And unfortunately, the disc was corrupt, so I wasn't actually able to use it until pretty recently, when another copy luckily showed up on eBay and the disc was fully working. Now, eventually, we will get to the program itself running under MS-DOS. It is absolutely fascinating and the effects are really good, but different than what I expected. And before we get into why, we kind of need to go over Magic Eye and the 1990s rise of the concept of computer-generated auto-stereograms here on LGR. While the Magic Eye books didn't come around until the 90s, our story effectively begins in the 70s, with the first computer-generated auto-stereograms, a technique developed by neuroscientist Christopher Tyler, building on research done by Bella Jules at Bell Labs in the late 1950s on random dot stereograms. And the big innovation here was that autostereograms only needed one 2D image instead of two images, as before, with one for each eye to perceive 3D. This relies on a person's ability with two working eyes to have binocular depth perception, or stereopsis, which is where an image with perceivable depth arises from the different perspectives each eye has of a three-dimensional scene. Meaning if eyes are focused a certain way, each one will see a different section of the dots, and the brain stitches them together into a 3D image. And images created in this style are known as Single Image Random Dot Stereograms, or SIRDS, SIRDS for short. And with the 1990 publication of a paper called The Autostereogram by Christopher Tyler and Maureen Clark, the information was out there, leading hobbyists with their own personal computers to start doing their thing. With the most notable one to our story being the article by Dan Dykman in the May/June 1990 issue of Stereo World magazine, going over single-image random dot stereograms made on a home computer. And it was this article in particular that caught the attention of Mr. Thomas Bechet, then the president of Pentica Systems Incorporated in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Tom and his company developed and sold debugging hardware and software packages for specific microcontrollers, with the Pentica MIME 700 in-circuit emulator as an example. After seeing those SIRDS images in Stereo World, Mr. Bechet saw an opportunity. His company was already using terms in their ads like "we love to solve puzzles," and what better puzzle than a 3D hidden image? So Tom wrote a program inspired by that article to create his own SIRDS for Pentica's next ad to appear in Embedded Systems Engineering magazine. Above the headline, "Pentica Loves Puzzles," was hidden M700, short for their MIME 700 in-circuit emulator, making the comparison between their debugging products and trying to see a hidden image. And go figure, Pentica got more response from the SIRDS 3D image than for their actual business. Calls, faxes, and letters came flooding in, far more than expected from a magazine ad with such limited circulation, with Bechet later saying, "If people were willing to write me letters, they might very well be willing to sign a check." And so he began marketing these images under one of his other companies, NE-Thing Enterprises, founded in 1990, running out of the same location as Pentica was in Massachusetts, and they started off by selling posters, calendars, t-shirts, and postcards like these here. Now, at first, the images were called stereos. Stereo image, you stare at them, yeah, you get it. With the line of products that contained these images called Gaze Toys. And the newly formed NE-Thing continued putting out lots of similar ads to that first one in periodicals like Games Magazine, 321 Contact, and Penthouse. Yeah, that Penthouse. 3D Tatas. Yeah, look at that product listing. It's clear they were just trying all sorts of things and seeing what stuck. But it turns out one of the most important ads was one they placed in American Way, the magazine for American Airlines on their planes, and that's where they caught the eye of various travelers from around the world, including business people in Japan with some kind of tie to the Tanyo Toy Company. It sold all kinds of different things, different puzzles and books and magic tricks. And they ended up making a deal with NE-Thing to distribute their images in Japan and under the Magic Eye brand name, which came from Tenyo, lining up with their other magic stuff. And as a result, it's in Japan where the first Magic Eye books were distributed starting in 1991, and they were an immediate big hit. And due to the success there, the Magic Eye products started selling elsewhere, and one of the first in the US, I believe, was this book here, Magic Eye, a book of postcards, combining a bunch of their previously sold postcards into a little booklet. But it was that very first Magic Eye book in North America that was the big one, Magic Eye, A New Way of Looking at the World, first published in September of 1993, and sold out practically immediately, as did the next run and the next. There were dozens of reprints. And this was followed by lots of other books, as well as a comic strip entering syndication in 1994. And eventually the company itself renamed from NE-Thing to Magic Eye Incorporated in 1996, a company that continues to this day. Yeah, Magic Eye is still around, being run by artist Sherry Smith and selling new stuff, including postcards, of course, and posters and books, as well as a yearly calendar. But okay, that's a lot of print media. What about the computer program for making them? What I've wondered about since I was a kid. Well, the Magic Eye books have some information at the start, but not a whole lot, and there were some articles and magazines and newspapers that went over vaguely how the images were created, but nothing too in-depth. And on the official Magic Eye FAQ, it says that, like a magic trick, it was a secret. You don't give away your secrets. In other words, proprietary patented stuff. Hence me being hugely surprised to see that Anything Enterprises themselves sold the program at one point, or really, a program. Because by the time they became Magic Eye, they had moved on from the dot patterns and onto these more visually pleasing auto-stereograms, an algorithm that was written by Bob Selitsky, who previously worked at Pentica. And with that pattern tiling algorithm and software in place, the aforementioned Sherry Smith was brought in to do the artwork, including the 3D models that you would actually be looking at, and I believe also the patterns and colorful images. So if they didn't use this, then what the heck is Stereo Workshop? I mean, Anything Enterprises didn't even create it themselves. They advertised it and sold it, but if you look in the credits, it's actually made by Michael Bilinski of Microsynectic. And his name immediately rung a bell for a couple of reasons, it turns out. The first being that Bilinski also created the software and design packages for Hallusion Images, released by Envision Graphics, really the main competitor to Magic Eye back in the day. They had their own mall kiosks and tons of posters as well. In fact, the Calypso Reef one here, I remember seeing that all over the place, and yeah, that is a Hallusion Envision Graphics creation by Bilinski. And definitely not his last. The other reason he came to mind is because Envision Design is what the company became later, and they were the ones that did all of these goofy early internet flash games, including Elf Bowling, as well as Santa Balls, and I'm sure some other things mentioned here on LGR, but yeah, what an odd through line and connected bunch of people. Anyways, that same Bilinski that put together Stereo Workshop. So while Anything probably used proprietary in-house software to create Magic Eye, this is undoubtedly very close to what they used to create their original postcards and other single image random dot stereograms without any textures going on. And unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot more information about the program Stereo Workshop itself. There were some mentions in articles and ads, as we've seen, and a review here and there in very regional publications, but that's about it. And the archived scans of the book and the version 1.20 disc images you see online, those are from my copies. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right to it on a DOS PC here, with the program installing quite quickly from a 360K 5¼ inch floppy, which is not copy protected. However, the program itself is, with a manual lookup check every single time you start the program up. And it's a pretty unconventional one, so it refers to the beginning of each chapter of the book that it comes with, where you have to find something hidden within the SERD's image. It's kind of clever and also very annoying. Thank goodness that it's been cracked. The release of version 1.21 of the program found in the latest ExoDOS releases is fixed so where you just type in anything, it doesn't have to be correct and it'll let you in. I didn't know about this version at all until this video. I don't know when it came about. I couldn't find copies when I started on this 5 years ago. And now with version 1.21 of the program going, we can do a few things. Starting with setting up the program in general, which consists of selecting an output, either an actual printer or just outputting to an image file of your various 90s types, your TIFFs, PCXs, and bitmaps mostly, or selecting nothing will output to the screen, as we're going to do here. There are also some image-specific options like selecting your interocular distance for the depth control, going with multicolor or monochrome dot patterns, showing the fusion dots, the 2 up at the top of the page, and if multicolor selected, you can choose which individual colors you want from a selection of 16. And yeah, this runs at a max of 640 by 480, 16 colors. And that's about all that pertains to what we're going to be doing here, so let's start a new drawing, which provides a canvas over on the right, 9 tools for drawing, selecting, and opening menus, and the 16 different available colors on the left with an associated number for each. And these will indicate the depth in your resulting 3D images, with the gray 8 up at the top being the closest to your eye and the -7 kind of lighter blue at the bottom being the deepest into your drawing. So like if we just use the circle tool here and then select a different color for each one, then every circle from blue up through the gray will get progressively closer to your eyeballs. And to see those results, either make the stereo from the main menu or press F10, and a multicolored dot pattern is generated quite quickly. And there we go, we've created our first Magic Eye image, or really stereo dot pattern image. And I don't know about you, but on the right screen at the right distance, I could see this image almost immediately. There's something about the way this program generates these. It's extremely effective. At least once you get back into how it feels to just let your eyes relax and show these kind of images to your brain. Or if you've never done it before, or you've had nothing but bad luck with them in the past, it's worth trying some of the techniques that are outlined on the back of the book that Stereo Workshop came with, as well as some more detailed information on these pages inside the book itself. And you'll note that it does not recommend going cross-eyed. In fact, doing that is probably going to give you bad results. These are not meant to be viewed cross-eyed. Some stereograms are, but these in particular are not. So with these, it's either calibrating using those 2 fusion dots, or just kind of relaxing your eyes to such a degree where you're defocusing and kind of looking through the image. Or the way I like to think about it is looking through a window at the tree outside. You're not looking at the glass, you're looking through the glass. Don't focus on that, try to focus on what's behind it. Or if all else fails, perhaps you want to try the official Magic Eye the video from 1994. It's awesome, and not just because it's pretty good at teaching how to see these things, but it's the whole presentation. The whole way it's put together is so delightfully mid-90s. The entire energy and vibe and feel of this is wonderful. There are full rips of it linked in the video description. And if you still can't get yourself to see these images, or there's something going on with your eyes and brain that prevent it from happening, then you can always toss these images into something like Photoshop, creating duplicates of the image and then applying a difference layer to one of them, overlapping until you can kinda see what you're supposed to see. Or you can just use a stereogram solver tool. There are several of those online that work very well. But yeah, back to the program. I mean, we've kinda seen the majority of what it does, but there are some more options. Beyond the basic circles, squares, and triangles, there's also a tool for drawing free-form polygons in any shape or number of sides you wish, as well as a line drawing tool acting as a tool for drawing lines with a tool. And you can place blocks of text, with things like fonts, sizing, and width attributes being adjusted by pressing F8. In fact, the majority of things are adjusted using different function keys, with details brought up by clicking the question mark. So for instance, color map options lets you adjust the levels of depth for each of the colors. Changing the quantum size adjusts how many levels are between each number, and going from absolute to relative makes the difference even more pronounced. Then we have the 3D settings, which can be applied to shapes using the select tool and pressing F7. And these are awesome. You can apply effects like domes, pyramids, donuts, stars, and spires. These use those same colors, but in different patterns to make the otherwise simple shapes look less like cutouts and more like 3D objects. And the last main feature is the ability to import PCX images, allowing the use of any compatible 16-color file as your canvas. Unfortunately, you're still limited to those same 16 colors at most though, and you can't draw on them or move them or change their colors or anything, so it's crazy limited what you can actually do here. But it's a nice shortcut to making more complex shapes without having to rely on the extremely limited tools with Stereo Workshop. And that really is it for this program. It's not too involved, and like I said, the effect of the 3D is very nice, at least to my eyes, but what you can actually pull off here is so much less impressive than the Magic Eye books. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is, of course, all of the artwork, the patterns, the actual images that they were using as the basis instead of just dots. But also underneath that, it's not just relying on basic shapes and 16 colors for depth. The reason so many of these looked as good as they did is because they were using ray-traced 3D imagery with gradients and shadows, usually 256 levels. Not at all the type of image you could generate within Stereo Workshop or even import into it due to the color and resolution restrictions. However, there were, and are, so many other programs for generating single-image stereograms. Like in 1993, you had Stereograms with an exclamation point by Lifestyle Software, as well as Stereolutions by IO Software in 1994. Then in 1995, there was the Mind Image software, and one way that you got that was this awesome Stereogram Programming Techniques book, which I highly recommend. It's very useful for this video. And then things in the 2000s up to today, like Stereogram Explorer in 2001, which is old but is still on sale today. And then what we have here is SURDS by Katsura Software, the newest one of these that I've used and is currently available on the macOS App Store. This not only lets you generate the traditional dot patterns, but also some with much more colors and textures and even images. So if you really want to create your own Magic Eye style auto stereograms, this is the kind of program that you want to be looking for. Though it's much harder in my experience to get great results from this, there's just so many more different attributes to adjust and things to calibrate, not to mention finding suitable images that make good patterns. And of course, you need some kind of 3D image to go underneath it. But this program, and pretty much every other one like it, is going to require the use of some external program to actually create these source 3D images. Exactly like the ones found in the back of the Magic Eye books, with a black background and objects going from darker to lighter in terms of a gradient to get that nice 3D effect. Just don't do what I was doing here. I did the effect all wrong. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I really wish that I could have somehow found even just a little bit of footage of the actual Magic Eye software, even from way back in the day. It would just be fascinating to see the exact process from the early 90s. But I get it. I just hope somebody over there at the company has preserved it. Anyway, let me know your memories of Magic Eye things or whatever your regional equivalent was. I know there were so many different types of stereograms being released throughout the 90s. This is a very deep rabbit hole, and I keep finding stuff up until the very moment that I'm about to hit render on this. I keep adding things in, so I'm sure there's plenty I don't know about. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and do stick around for other LGR things continually in the works for the future. And as always, thanks for watching.